and convene a regular session. We need a motion. Four, zero. We're going to proceed with approving the public comment to be moved prior to the study session. Hear me? Yes. All right, I have our
All right. Good evening, Board President Mrs. Seha Martinez, Interim Superintendent Linda Pallas Thompson, and board members. My name is Heather Hart, and I've been a teacher at Peoria Flex Academy for the last 11 years. I come to you before you today as a collective voice for the Peoria Flex Academy. First, we would like to thank you for the overwhelming support you showed us a few weeks ago at our graduation ceremony. Those of you in attendance saw firsthand what happens when disengaged students who previously struggled in traditional settings are paired with teachers and staff with passion, love, and consistency. The result is students who believe in themselves and see opportunities they never thought possible. Young men and women ready to take on the world. Over the course of the last 4 years and under the stable tutelage of Mrs. Sybil Jacob, Peoria Flex Academy has grown over 130%. As we share space in Old Main, a building that also houses the ever-growing Met Professional Academy, we have been looking forward to the opportunity for each school and program to find its own space. One option on the table includes the Challenger Space Center. We recognize that there has been much controversy surrounding this purchase and subsequent improvements needed to ensure it is appropriately converted to a learning institution. We also recognize that there are many needs in the district and options to consider. That said, we want to publicly request that PFA be given serious consideration as the one to call the Challenger Space Center home. As I mentioned, I have been at PFA for 11 of its 13 years. I have seen firsthand the continuous shuffle of our school. Over our 13-year existence, we have been moved 4 times, and we look forward to the idea that our school could finally land at a location with its own address and the ability to have its name on the property. You see, at Old Main, the building displays the name of Peoria High School and Met. In fact, even the room numbers only recognize the Met as tenants. There is nothing that suggests that PFA even exists. Many of our students come from turbulent and transient backgrounds. Our school is their safe haven, their home base. We are really good at making a silk purse out of a sow's ear, as we have done time and time again, and we welcome the opportunity to do the same at a place for our students to finally call their forever home, the Challenger Space Center. We hope that as the district moves forward with considerations for this space, we are seen as the best and most viable candidate to embrace this location. We thank you for your time.
Very much. Followed up. Forward to number 5, study session. I do have public comments. That here to discuss a strategic update be led by a team. So looking forward to start.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the governing board, pardon me, Ms. Pallas Thompson and fellow colleagues and community members. We're delighted to have the opportunity to provide an update. It's been a little while since we did an update. A lot has happened, as I know you're all intimately aware, over the last few months. We'll talk to that just briefly. As you pointed out, I'll be joined tonight by 4 of my colleagues. Dr. Kendra Bell will be joining us, as well as Ms. Allie Bridgewater, Michelle Myers, and Ms. Danielle Airy. And they represent each of the 4 strategic perspectives that we have seen become really a bedrock of our planning effort. And so we're really delighted to have them here to help us move forward. Let me bring up, oh, you already brought it up, great. So just very briefly, a couple of comments on how we've gotten to this point. This is a review, of course, and for members of the public that are listening. On February 24th of this year, we had a Saturday study session where we introduced the idea of a strategic planning process. We talked about our 6-step process, which I won't go over here, but we spent a great deal of time on that. One of the really fundamental things we did, with, of course, the participation of the board, was to identify who the judge of our quality is. And, of course, resoundingly, that is the community. The community decides if we're doing a good job or not, and their opinion, their value is what's important to us. We identified 4 strategic perspectives. Now, those are really the lens through which the community views our quality. And we'll talk about those a little bit more tonight. Won't review it right at the moment, but again, those have become the pillars of our strategic planning process. We went through a brief strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats analysis. I shared that information subsequent to that with members of the executive team and some others. Pardon me. And then finally, we talked about the fact that a strategic plan is not an event, but it's a process that has to be institutionalized within the district, and that's part of the work that we're going to be talking about tonight, as well as moving forward. I'll mention that this, of course, is a study session, so we'd like this to be as interactive as possible, so please at any time feel free to stop myself or any of the other presenters as we go through. We'll try to keep this short so that there's plenty of time for discussion. We did an update on March 15th, and basically what we did there was got an affirmation from the governing board of the process that we intend to use. And we also talked about timeline. We talked about the need for establishing board policy that mandates an ongoing strategic planning process, and generally had that level of update. Now, since then, we've had some major disruptions, I think it's safe to say. We had a meeting or two after this March update, and then we immediately got into the whole Red for Ed discussion and the school closures that came out of that, and so we were pretty tied up with that. And so we were unable to really focus on strategic planning really for quite several weeks. As a result of that, we got together and decided to take a different approach. decided to create a transition strategic plan. Now, we could come up with a better name than that if we want to, but that very accurately describes what we're talking about. Is rather than delay even further the creation of a long-term strategic plan, we felt that for many reasons that we'll talk about, it'd be important to have a solid strategic plan that would take us through this upcoming school year and on into the start of the next school year. We'll talk about what that looks like. And then what we decided to do is subsequent to that, in the fall of this year, then we'll restart our full six-step process, engaging the community in that process as we go forward. We'll talk about a specific activity we're going to do with regard to that later in the presentation. So in response to that, the executive team plus a few extra people held a strategic planning retreat, an all-day retreat on the 4th of June. That turned out to be a very productive session. And what we did as a result of that, during that session, is developed a complete framework and primary components for our transition strategic plan. We also, and this is very important, agreed upon a governance and execution monitoring process to ensure that that plan will be successfully executed. And then finally, we also outlined a communication strategy for the public, and so that we can start engaging the broader set of stakeholders in our community as we move forward, not only with this plan, but the, as I said, the longer term six-step plan that we'll do. So what are the goals for that plan? As you see up there, they are anchored on our 4 strategic perspectives. Again, we'll talk about those a little bit more later in the presentation. And this is critically important. We wanted to make sure that we're providing clear, integrated, unambiguous direction for the schools and departments and our other stakeholders focused on this upcoming school year. Now that was important to us because we all felt, and this is really the reason we had the retreat, we all felt that, as we know, we've gone through a couple of years of some uncertainty around our direction. And we felt like we cannot wait for this longer but appropriate process to take its course. We need to have direction now for this coming school year. So that was really what makes up that goal there. It's built on 2 priorities. One is that important strategic work that we've already started. Now, partly as a result of sharing the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats analysis, but also in terms of our thinking as we were going through other things like the school closures and all that, we really identified some very important programs that needed to start, and we have some of those underway. We'll talk about that. And so that's part of what you'll see reflected in this plan. And then also we decided that one of the most important things we could do in this upcoming school year, and it's really about stability, is making sure that our fundamental operating practices are sound. We want to make sure that whether Ms. Pallas-Thompson is here for a year or 2 years or however long that is, we want to make sure that during that period we solidify how we operate so that we can say as we go through it at the end of that, whatever that period is, we can say we have a school district that can execute it very effectively, and that's important to us. And so those are the 2 priorities that we decided on. We also know that there has been a remarkable, this year, transition or change at the administrative level throughout the district, over 40 administrators. And we've obviously been a part of approving some of those in the last few meetings. And so that in and of itself creates the need to make sure that those new administrators or administrators with new jobs can stabilize in those positions and have a stable set of requirements around them so that they can get used to where they are and begin to operate very, very effectively. And then finally, as I said, we want to provide a very strong base on which our next superintendent can build with whatever vision he or she may bring to our district. There really are 3 basic components of the plan, and we're going to go through that tonight. The first one, again, we'll talk some more, and I keep saying that, about the strategic perspectives. I never want to miss an opportunity to show them because they're so important to us. But there they are in terms of our community members that may not be familiar with them. And then we identified 2 categories of very important, 2 very important components. I put the word strategic in quotes because so we don't keep stumbling over the strategic word over and over and over again. But basically, we identify strategic programs, and within each of those programs, we identify strategic projects. You'll hear about those things as we go through the presentation tonight. Now, the programs Go back to our 6-step process. We talk about our 4 strategic perspectives, and then the very next thing is to talk about what are those programs that we must execute on an ongoing basis extremely well so that our community will say that they're doing well within those 4, from the perspective of those 4 pillars. And so, yes, ma'am.
Programs kind of were the
That's very close. In fact, you'll see in a lot of other districts' plans, they often just go right to the word goal. And it's almost synonymous with the programs that they're doing. We take a little bit different view of it, which is that there are lots of programs that we need to execute. And some of those, even as important as they are, may not be the strategic focus at any point in time. And so what we do is we develop goals for those strategically focused programs in our plan. And so each one of these programs will have goals associated with it, 1 or more goals associated with it. But the programs themselves are what we effectively measure to make sure that we're addressing the 4 strategic effects. I don't know if that answers the question. We can elaborate. You won't see those goals tonight because that's one of our next steps we have to do. But you're very close. The goals are almost synonymous with. Now, those programs are new or revitalized programs. So they may be brand new programs that we need to establish, or they may be existing programs that we need to make improvements. So ongoing programs, a program is distinct from a project in that a program doesn't have a start or a stop, or it might have a start, but it doesn't have a stop, as opposed to a project which has a very defined start and stop. Those programs address major weaknesses, or they pursue new or emerging opportunities. That's a direct result of typically our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And they directly contribute to 1 or more of the strategic perspectives. And then within each one of those programs, there's 1 or more strategic projects. And those are projects that are designed to create a capability, create an improvement, add some capacity, whatever the requirement is to that program. They are managed and measured to ensure the success of the parent programs. Now, what you're going to hear tonight are candidate programs. What we've done is identified those, and we have some definition around those programs. And then in the basically June through July, early August timeframe, we'll be vetting all those programs. Because one of the things we have to do, in addition to assigning goals, is we have to look at the resources required for each of those programs and make sure that we're not double booking resources, or we have sufficient funding to make sure we complete the project. So some of the ones we'll talk about tonight might fall off the table. We might introduce some new ones, but these are, we feel, very strong set of programs. So that's what that says. Now, the next thing we decided to do was to gain some feedback from the larger set of our administrators. So at our June 7th all-administrator meeting, we had a strategic planning update very similar to what we're doing tonight. We presented each of the 4 strategic perspectives, the programs, and the projects that were identified during our retreat to all of our administrators, and we gained feedback by doing that. We essentially broke into 4 groups. It was very interactive, conducted round-robin feedback sessions that were led by all but one of the same people in the room tonight. Shared programs and projects for each of those strategic perspectives, and then we answered questions and gathered feedback based on a 4-question protocol. And then in general, I can tell you right now that the feedback was very positive, a lot of great questions. There was at least 1 project that we've added to our set as a result of feedback we got in the room. And then what we're doing now is starting to analyze that feedback in a little bit more depth so we can figure out what adjustments, how we need to incorporate the feedback. Okay, what I wanted to do now, I've said that we're going to talk about the strategic perspectives. One of the first things we did in the retreat was to add definition to each of those terms. Now, the terms you saw earlier, they seem kind of self-explanatory, and that's by design. They should be fairly self-explanatory. But it's important that we have a specific definition so that everybody understands what we mean, we have common terms, and importantly, that we put scope around the definition. Because some things could be so big that you don't know when it starts and when it stops. We need to make sure we all know this is what we mean, and this is the universe that's described by that particular perspective. So what I'd like to do right now is put those definitions up and then have an opportunity to ask you a question about them and get some of your feedback. First one, student success, and each one kind of has components. This one is all students achieving college and career readiness and discovering and fulfilling their full potential. Okay, so that's what we mean by student success. The next one, and then we'll have the question to talk about all of them. Safety and well-being. Maintaining safe, inviting, nurturing, and respectful environments for students, staff, and community. That's what we mean by safety and well-being. Stewardship of community resources. Solidifying and adhering to effective policies, practices, and accountability for all of our district resources. And then finally, the community connection, which is enhancing a culture of active engagement that encourages and strengthens parent and community partnerships across all of our strategic areas. So those are the four perspectives. And now the question I have for you, we'd love to hear your feedback on this, is from your perspective, and then as you represent the community, what you think their perspective is. Do these definitions make sense? If I'm a parent or a business owner out in the community and somebody shows these to me, are these going to make sense to me? Am I going to understand them?
Mr. Gay, I think for me, and this is a question and a comment with regard to student success, you know, when we talk about that term, success, in our students, and maybe discovering and fulfilling their potential covers what I'm about to say, but I think college, career, you know, and life, right? Because I think when we talk about student success, academics, absolutely, and we can measure that. And the other side is their ability to be adaptable and confident and RC, and ability to engage and interact in adverse conversations and, you know, de-escalate situations, et cetera. You know, I think, you know, all of those aspects certainly represent, you know, success in a student as well. So is that kind of umbrellaed or detailed within discovering and fulfilling their potential, or just wanting to understand the soft skills and the social emotional side of student success?
Well, I'd say definitely, thank you, Mr. Sandoval, I'd say definitely that it does encompass that. I think the important thing to also recognize is that it turns out that these four perspectives all work together. And so you can't just do one by itself.
Yeah.
They all four work together. And so when we combine fulfilling their potential with the safety and well-being perspective in particular, then it really expands to encompass that scope that you just described. A part of the safety and well-being, of course, and well-being, I think in particular, is that we want to make sure that our students, when they come to school, feel like they're safe, not just physically, but they're safe to express their opinions, they're safe to be who they are, they're safe that they know if a debate gets out of hand that some adult is going to be there to help de-escalate the situation and restore the civility that we need to have. So they need to feel confident in all those things, and that's what that perspective is about. And they're doing that within the context of reaching whatever goals and dreams that they have.
Okay.
In perspective, in relation to what you asked about, what the community thinks of this, one of the things, and I bet you we will all agree, that when we're out in the community, there's this perception that we're not teaching life skills, that kids aren't learning how to balance a checkbook. Not that anybody has a checkbook anymore, but we hear that all the time. Or they don't know how to make a bed, or they don't know how to prepare a meal for themselves. And I actually think that is, I think we do that in a lot of cases, but I like the idea of adding, ensuring all students achieve college, career, and life skills or life readiness. And that is those practical things like how do you apply for a loan, right? And it's also how do you negotiate a deal, right? When do you call the doctor or not? You know, those kinds of things.
Does it make sense in there to say ensuring all students will achieve and demonstrate college, career, and go through life readiness skills while covering? I think
That'd be a very-
I think that we've discussed it a couple of times.
It'd be a very simple ad. We could do that, for sure.
Perfect.
Happy to do that.
I will add to that the 2 points to support Mr. Sandoval's is serving the whole child, soft skills, and emotional skills. So, Mr. Sandoval, your comments hit on all 3. Big one is financial literacy, which ties into Misconnect, which is life skills. And that's not even when they're out of school, it's even when they're in school, budgeting. So when they achieve college and career, but what happens in the present day? So we have the future, what are we doing today? Yesterday, how are we self-reflect? I don't know what the words would be to incorporate that, so today when they do get that $100 savings.
Another thing I thought of, and this is what I hear in the community, is people say, well, not all kids have to be prepared to go to college. Most people are unaware of our CTE programs and our work preparation programs. But there is that idea out there that preparing for a career is equally as valuable as preparing for college. So I'm wondering if there was discussion about and versus or.
I'm trying to remember. I don't think that there was specific discussion about those word choices there, but what we did certainly talk about the fact that that our trades program, our CTE program, and all that's a vital part of this. We could, I'm looking at my colleagues. We could certainly change it to and or. That would.
In my imagination, kids that are going right into work eventually end up taking some college, and kids that go into college probably have to work. So it could be and, but there is a perception out there that, but by some, that we're college focused.
Right.
Now, Mr. Gay,
Yes.
So when we take a look at safety and well-being, maintaining safe, inviting, nurturing, and respectful environments for students, staff, and community, when we talk about our different, all of our stakeholders, right, within the district, we always talk about teachers and staff, right? So I'm going to assume staff is all-inclusive, all
Yes,
stakeholders.
yes. We
So
just
is
say
there,
staff, it's everybody.
okay, so there's no need to call out teachers
Correct.
and staff? Okay.
Okay.
The only thing I would like to consider, please, Mr. Gay, direct me, where the inclusivity practice would fall under. Is it well-being? Is it community connect? It addresses all areas, but where does that statement of inclusive practices represent our?
Right. Thank you, Madam President. I believe that the answer to that question is that it's a two-part answer. It's for students in particular. It's addressed in the safety and well-being area because, again, we want to make sure that when students come to school, they feel like they're a part of what's going on there. They're included in every activity, everything that's happening in the classroom and the school. I think that that particular bullet also says staff and community, but I think that the perhaps more direct part of community inclusiveness is in the last section, where we're inviting our entire community to be a part of what we do and extending that invitation. One of the things we talk about there, and it goes back to that general comment we talked about during the Saturday retreat in February, which is that last bullet talks about the quality of the relationship that the organization has with the people that benefit from what it does. That's a real general way of describing this, and that's really what that means. And so we will talk specifically about things like certain partnership programs and things of that nature and activities with the community. But what we're really saying is we want to make sure that the entire community feels like the relationship that we have with that entire community is a very quality, highly effective, and that would include inclusivity of.
I would like to see in providing and nurturing, I would like to use the word inclusive practices, that safety and well-being. Somehow adding that word of inclusivity in that. If we're nurturing and inviting, respecting our environments of our students, staff, and community.
I want that word included too, but I'm looking back on the wall behind your head. In addition to our strategic plan, we've always had a value statement, and we've made it nice and, fit into the PEORIA, which is nice, but I think overarching value statement has to do, overlaps everything, right? Overlaps our budget, our test scores, overlaps our hiring practices. If we had values, and I think inclusivity is one of our values, I think integrity is one of our values, equity is one of our values, and I think if we continue to talk,
Is incorporated in every single strategic.
overlap everything we.
Yes, ma'am, and I'm quite certain, and we've begun to talk about materials for communicating this to the public, and I'm absolutely certain that when we do that, the very first part of that communication, we talk about our values, has to, because then the plan makes sense.
Kind of like Rotary, right? They recite their value statement. Fair is good for everybody. It's a constant reminder on
The values that we have, when we started, is it good? Thank you. The values that we actually have, we were keeping our mission, we were going to keep our vision as it was, and the values, my understanding was we were going to make sure that those still were the areas. Am I correct, as team? Is that what we were doing with that? I think the word, your point, as we're looking at it, the word that is missing is probably the word respectful. You're respectful when you are inclusive. So I think we've been talking inclusive. We probably need to take maintaining safe, inviting, nurturing, and inclusive environments for that takes the diversity piece. That takes the, and if you're inclusive, you have to be. That respectful is a way to be inclusive. I think that's a subset of that.
spell out. I don't think it's
Yeah,
necessary.
maybe we don't need it anymore.
Right?
Right? We maybe can remember about
Right.
the acronym.
But when we talk about so they're there. I
think that's a good idea. I think we can probably, that certainly can help with that. Yeah, what are we actually saying then? Are we? In a quick, what do we value in an elevator? Good. Thank you. That's good.
Thank you very much for those comments. So as we start the next section, here's where my colleague. So what we're going to do here is each of my colleagues to address one of the four aspects. That they'll talk about programs, which you see slide there. They'll also talk about some of these candidate projects that we developed during our retreat, shared. I've asked them to be brief and high level time to answer questions. So each one of them will only take 5 to 6 minutes, and so we'll try to go through that quickly. Then we'll wrap up. Have whatever discussion you want to have. We'll wrap up with some thoughts on next steps. Go ahead and.
Excited to talk about students. Oh, student success. Really. This may sound a little bit repetitive because all of the times that I have addressed the board, there have been pieces of this. So this strategic effort allows us to bring these projects together and make a plan for improvement and implementation. The first program project that we were interested in taking a hard look at had to do with additional opportunities, more flexibility for students to earn high school course credit. I presented to the governing board that we purchased one digital tool as opposed to having the high schools purchase different and their own digital tool for our summer school. We knew we needed to revamp that. We also knew that we needed to address students who were repeaters, students who had failed the course, and then in fact the next school year would roll in exactly the same course. We need an alternative. Didn't work the first time, so likely not to work the second. We began to look at the product Edgenuity to implement this summer. Students can come in, gain credit in a variety of coursework, from mathematics to history to ELA, etc., and begin keeping better pace with their peers and earn that credit in a more flexible manner as opposed to courses the next school year. At the end of the summer, we'll be working with those teachers that implemented this, who have been trained, to talk about how we can use these tools in blended classes across high school. The next area that we talked about, student January, about our concerns associated with reading. We would like to certainly look at all core content areas, but reading takes a higher priority than others because that's our relatively weak area. We have purchased a new reading diagnostic tool so that all kids K-8 will have diagnostic by mid-September, and we'll be able to track, measure, progress, monitor their reading level throughout. We know, too, that we have work to do in mathematics. We adopted materials 2 years ago, but stopped with the ongoing professional development. We knew we needed to get back to that. Comprehensive program includes digital tools and other important instructional materials. This next school year, we'll have new standards in science and social studies. That will be at the state level, so those will get adopted. That will cause us to look carefully at our scope and sequence K-12. There will be, of course, go on grade level to another. There's also like high school courses. So that will be pretty heavy lift in science and social studies and will be critical to success.
With the science adoption, with the new standards, we'll reevaluate our curriculum to ensure alignment. Do our science teachers have a budget for the equipment that they need to do experiments and whatnot?
We get better. I also know that we're looking at digital tools for those labs, in that it's difficult to dissect live animals when you could have an interactive experience through digital products. So we're trying to think a little bit less traditional in terms of some of those experiences for kids to have a well-rounded lab experience, but we do know that we're going to have to look at for both science.
Outside of a
Oh, I agree. And I know science. I think we'll probably need to assess that whole lab. absolutely. Judy Meredith worked very closely with their one of the other areas, and I talked a little bit about this, but not drilling down much as we are. We need to look at sub. Did that with our principal days. We presented them with a variety of data and drilled down into discipline data that's disaggregated. We began to compare schools with schools to see relative areas of strength so that we can begin building our own collaborative administrative mindset as we work. We haven't received all of our subgroup performance, but we know through history in that performance that we are slow to reclassify ELL students, and we have pretty flat growth in special education. So that, I think, area around professional development as well as resources, and to really take a look at our approach philosophy associated with growth with students with disabilities. So we have, again, started drilling down, and already principals are drilled down by name in our ELL, look at the level of those kids and be paying attention to that effort. So we did notice some disparity in discipline data. There are already schools that we're working with, I'm working with in terms of looking at that and what can we do, what are other efforts, if you will, to intervene, post react to student behavior. So we're taking part. Finally, we know that the district started with collaborative time. We tended to, after that, certainly modified Mondays are fabulous for come together to dig into those standards, map the standards out, generate common formative assessments so that we can better understand students learned it or not. We need to own it when they don't. So we will be looking at a tighter professional learning community process, which will further the PPF, not just in the common. So look to really engage teachers and understand their standards. Questions for the board? With student success perspective, I kind of wanted to know, covered strategic support program to the board member, and how might our community prioritize?
They're all great. The area that I think might miss, and I think it's missing because we tend to see our influence, our students, and on graduates. But we hear from colleges and universities that students have spent many, and not all are from wherever, have to spend time in remedial. That is a burden on their time as students, burden on. So my question is are we having dialogue with the community colleges and private colleges and the state university? And do we have the ability to look at our students? Are they coming out of our district truly prepared to success in whatever? If they're not, I think we need to do.
It's becoming a larger problem for graduating seniors going into college when they take those course assessments. I've had a brief conversation with even Glendale Community College, as well as ASU. We have a couple of partnerships we're beginning to think about there, mostly for teacher retention and group. But I think that conversation probably should be expanded. The thing that some of this work for us, the Arizona College and Career Readiness standards are written such that there is a higher level of rigor. We know in working with our principals, teachers, some of the dialogue that we need more attention to helping all of us understand what that means. I believe that once we get better at identifying the level of rigor within these standards, our kids.
Yeah, but it is about dialogue. For example,
I agree.
I'm sure that our standards say my most real example this college asked her big they don't certainly if our math teachers fourth grade knew that was the stumbling, we would work. And I don't know that here by having that conversation with college, what is
Increasing support content areas, K-12, as we're looking certainly at the high school, we're not seeing the levels of achievement we want on AZ Merit or ACT. Or,
correct.
although you'll be getting good reports on AP that I'm so excited about. We haven't tracked those in a long time. Getting those the next report. We're getting $300 per child here in the school is child that passed the AP 3, 4, 5. And so that the money is going to be coming in to share with teachers and programs as we look at that. But if those increase, student achievement in core content areas in things that are measured, those types of things, kids then
ACT.
are ready for college. You know, or those scores that are not pleasant in 11th grade now. We're increasing those student achievement. These are the goals. Significant.
Well, and that also has to do with making sure our teachers understand those. What is it kids have to know and be able to do when they graduate grade 11, right? So we have to be very intentional about what 11th grade writing is going to look like and what are the requirements of writing. So that's where I think and good instruction help all of us plan to implement with the level of rigor.
Many of our teachers at the community college level, and that's a huge benefit for us. We also do get in colleges actually break down according to high school which students go in at the remedial level, and they can break it down, especially in math. If they take a specific course, they're more likely to test in at a higher level than if they only meet minimum requirements. So we have a pretty good relationship, and the majority of our students go to either Glendale Community College or satellite campus. We have a pretty good relationship with those people in between there.
Next, I'd like to comment about dialogue. Glendale Community College is good. Kids don't know they can take it twice or have multiple opportunities within a specific period of time. So we probably do a better job work with our kids in high school in looking forward as they fill out job applications, take those college assessments early, a lot of our kids spring, and really work to make sure we know where they are in that. Find what what dialogue. One, what is our data? Uh, Are we do have a plan for that in place with the principals. I think we're very appreciative of having work time days. They create days. They have submitted and been going through them one at a time, pulling through their data to get back. They've already started. So while they're looking at their data, they will be working their turn, because the very first step and get back those ways know what might or align. Third point, ask our policy. Our we will make that happen. We've already had some dialogue. Make sure when we make a shift, make it part of doing business. We do quarterly. Then we'll bench for we do for low. So you're getting on it for it.
So, bullet number youth data will potentially inform, even alternative students in school. So, for me, as a student suspended, or just at home, or learning, they're coming back, so potentially upset that they were suspended, but certainly, not different than what they were. So, how do we, hopefully, that data will help us really maximize those.
We have applied for a grant for planning, not that we're just going to plan. But we do know that we need to create some tiered interventions, both on the academic side of the house as well as the student behavior side of the house. Punishment and suspensions and consequences often does not change behavior of kids who are in 2-tier and tier 3. They need interventions to help them shape their behavior and be more successful in school. So we've got a large lift to do there. Certainly, we're going to get started this year. I'm looking at Ally because we just had a 1.5-hour meeting on that. So it does have a lot to do with safety, but in looking at the data, I asked the principals to look at the number of days that kids were out of school, and that has just about everything to do with student success.
Thank you.
Dr. Phil, I had just a couple questions. One is I'm happy we're updating the math and science standards, but in terms of I guess having an equal, I guess my concern is that all students, say in math, come from feeder schools and they come with the same knowledge. They're able to jump into algebra equally. I know that's kind of a lofty goal, but I know that has been issues in the past. That was one. And with dollar amounts being to a limit, what are the grades that should have more emphasis so we can have better outcomes all the way through high school?
Well, I think we took a stronger, we have to pay attention. I keep saying that word. We have taken about a month to assess every 8th grade student in our district in reading. That was a shared effort at the site and district level. I had 2 of my team members spend a week poring over that data, looking at student profiles, and making careful decisions associated with placement. The reason for that is while we have some intervention programs, they're not going to work for every kid. So we have to do a good job in the transition from 8th grade to 9th grade. What people would say about that comment, we want all kids to be ready by X, at the end of every grade level, is that idea of a guaranteed and viable curriculum as kids move through the system. So they're actually achieving all of those grade level standards, and we want to guarantee that. What, in dialogue with principals and teachers and our content folks, I'm not sure we've done our due diligence, and it's back to teachers and collaborative teams, really identifying those standards and what they mean, K-12. So again, now, while I'm concerned about our core performance, our relative weakness is reading. So we started really drilling down and getting to what each 8th grader in our district needs by kid. So that takes time. It takes a lot of intention. But we also know that all that work on the front end will likely result in more success in those 9th grade courses.
Okay, I think we can.
No, I'm not done.
Oh, I'm sorry. I
Let me
didn't
just-
see you move to that microphone.
That's all right. A couple of things, and some I think are overarching, and then some I think are drilling down. I'm not sure. You can help me picture this in my head. Where does personalized learning fit in here is one question. And then the other ones are, where does arts education fit into here? And where do our phenomenal athletics programs fit into here?
Let me take the first one. The personalized learning, we made an effort to incorporate blended learning in our classrooms in this past year. That meant technological tools in the hands of kids. They're sophisticated, self-pacing diagnostics, which help level kids and provide them practice and online instruction to move them through lessons or courses. We did a good job at experimenting with blended learning. We have a lot more to do to ensure that we're really personalizing learning in our classrooms. To personalize, we have to know where each kid is. We have to understand, even after we have taught that learning target in those standards, we have to know which kids got it and which kids did not. Then we have to own the idea that we must personalize learning for the kids that didn't get it and for the kids that did, so that we can continue to extend kids' learning and go back and try to reteach or fill in gaps or provide the necessary practice, etc., so that we can guarantee by the end of these grade levels that kids are exiting that grade level having mastered the standards. So personalizing is a little trickier than blended learning, but I think the process of the PLCs and answering the questions associated with what must they learn, what must they be able to do, what do we do, what does the system do when children do not learn it, and how is the system going to respond when the children do learn it.
So do you think that the future of education, we're going to get past this idea that all kids of the same age are going to finish this year on this month and have the same skills? Or are we ultimately, and maybe it's 5 years, 10 years, whatever, going to get to a point where kids are moving truly at their own pace? And so that maybe those classrooms are more fluid and the age groups are more expansive. And if we're getting there, what are we waiting for?
We'd like to say yes.
Yeah.
Public education, as you all know, is tough to change. We also are held accountable for grade level assessments by the state and federal level, mandatory test. That should not drive our decisions around student learning. The key is to personalization and to maybe not worry if we can change the system. For me, it's what can that teacher team do with this set of kids in making decisions about where they go next.
I don't mean to be flip. I understand all the
understand.
challenges, but when we talk about personalization, I get really excited because there's just so much.
There really is. We saw some of that
Yeah.
in terms of what kids are able to do. What I hope we do is incite passion for learning in kids so that they can accelerate through, yes, the use of technology, but it's bigger than that in terms of meeting their needs. So I do know in very healthy K-12 systems where they don't really worry about all the requirements associated with that, but kids move fluidly through the school. They move fluidly through a coursework, and even at the high school level, there's more flexibility, more opportunities for kids for credit, and there's a blending of ages of kids in terms of what learning looks like. So that is up to us to control.
Can we look into looping? That's supposed to be one of the most successful learning environments for kids.
It is because if you have teachers that want to do that, and you definitely want to have parents a part of that decision making, in terms of looping. You don't lose, I did it when I was a teacher. You know your kids. You don't lose ground. Starting over in that annual traditional mindset. In fact, even in public education, I think many of us as teachers can remember the days when you're like, oh, I don't really want to look at their cumulative folder because I want to have a fresh lens to look at kids. And I look back now and I think, wouldn't we want to know everything that there is to know? So as we look to the future, we see really great potential in that personalization. And that I think is why we're taking a harder look at our data and drilling down so that we know where the grade levels are, where the kids are, kids in special programs, and what those needs are.
Just to add to that comment, I would like to see our district shift to standard grading if we're going to look at that model instead of what we currently have, because if we're going to do personalized learning, standard-based grading would work with that.
Typically, when you move to standards, that's what you would see. We have not been, and I don't know the history of this quite yet, but we have not been able to tackle grading and not only associated with personalized learning, but grading associated with how much percentage counts for possibly a state test, homework, finished work or not. So that's a big conversation.
So that if we're giving grades based on behaviors, that goes into a different section. Because the behaviors is generally what kids get their grades on and not can they meet the standard. Did they turn in their work? They probably didn't sometimes, but can they pass the test? Do they understand those standards? Some of them can.
Therein lies the conversation.
And those are absolute directions, the standard-based, the looping, to refocus just for a second on the math, because I know it's an area that I have, and I know that's an area that it's crazy. I think hopefully by going back and using some of the materials and resources that we purchased and have been placed in rooms for a while, and doing some staff development, which we're planning around the math, and our math people are pretty darn good in refocusing them on that, we should be able to. It looks like to me, as I remember, the grades where it starts to fall is around 4th grade. And then we take it goes down, and we had a kick up in 8th for some reason. I think part of it had to do this last year actually with the technology and the repetition of going back and doing, repeat it for some of those skills. But that's where it goes. Algebra 1, I believe, was improved this year, which was, that was a good one. That was good. Not so much Algebra 2, right? Or Geometry,
Right.
one of those hit and did not do well.
We worked with our teachers and tried a little different things at Algebra 1. There was improvement. We know we need to work at geometry for sure. Algebra 2, it's just that progression of rigor and that mathematics course pathways. But we know that's a gateway to college. So we know we need to get back and work on some of those things.
When we take a look at all the data, and knowledge equates to accountability, right? And I agree. I mean, the challenge is going to be when you look at your strategy and your objectives is, what tactics we can implement to address and meet those objectives, right? In this case, student success. When we look at all the data, and it helps us understand where a student is in the learning process, bullet number 4, the PLC process to personalized learning, is that with students kind of like an advisory period, or am I looking at that wrong, that last bullet?
We actually have a meeting the last week of June, and we have an opportunity to look at social, emotional learning curriculum, if you will, so that there could be maybe not an advisory that they go to separate and apart from their homeroom class. I know that is a middle school model, But it's an opportunity for teachers to check in with kids on how they're feeling that day, on making sure that we're addressing the students' social, emotional needs as they come to us in the morning and in classrooms. And so we're exploring that in terms of the other side of the house to better support students around behaviors. Kids have behaviors for reasons.
Sure.
And so obviously, we want to make sure we're doing a good job of setting the stage for learning and knowing where our kids are.
Thank you.
Okay, well, proceeding on to the, before we actually proceed on to the next perspective, I did want to just, with regard to comments about board policy and aligning that with our strategic plan and our direction, you'll hear a little bit more about that tonight, because it turns out that's one of the priorities that we settled on. And so, as I mentioned earlier, these perspectives all work together, and so one of the things we'll have to do is make sure that as we prioritize the updating of our policies, that the prioritization is lined up with the priorities and the rest of our strategic plan. And so you'll hear more about that as we proceed. So I want to move on to the
Mr. Gay, I apologize for interrupting. We are having such great conversation, and I know we have some guests in our room, and I'm cognizant of their time and respect. I'm really concerned. I know we approved the agenda as presented, but I would like some feedback on if we could take a pause, move the consent agenda up. I also know that we have some administration appointees here. Is everybody okay with that? Okay, so do we need a motion to just, okay. All right, so at this time, and again, I appreciate, we were all getting anxious. So with that, we're going to move, take a little pause on our strategic planning session, and we are going to move to our consent agenda item. 9.1, approval of the minutes of the May 20, wait, excuse me. Yes, consent agenda item 9.1 through 9.11. Give Michelle just a brief moment, and so then I would need a motion, but we do have two guest public comments on number 9.2, human resource report, so we'll have to pull that. So I'll need a motion to approve the consent agenda item excluding 9.2, unless anybody else would like to discuss anything from the consent agenda.
Is that a move? Was that a motion?
I move to approve the consent agenda item excluding 9.2. We have a motion and a second to approve the agenda excluding, consent agenda item excluding 9.2. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Motion passes 5-0. And we'll move to 9.2, human resource report, and we'll go to our, Michelle, do you need a moment? Okay, sorry about that. We'll go to our two guest speakers. First, we'll have Marla Jean, I know her as Miss MJ Johnson, and the next, Ashley Vasconcelos. Vasconcelos. And then it'll be just a brief moment while she pulls up the clock for the 3 minutes. Okay, so Ms. Johnson, do it first. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Superintendent Palace Thompson, President Seha Martinez, governing board members, thank you very much for allowing me to indulge a few moments of your time. Usually I spend a lot of time speaking about my students. Today I would like to speak a little bit about myself. First of all, I would never jeopardize my students' success. I'm not leaving PUSD mid-year, but I am moving forward and moving on. I would hope this is evident in how hard I have worked engaging and inspiring my students to lead district end-of-course assessment scores semester after semester after semester. My student success is also evidenced via external validation, with my students being recognized in local, community, state, and national competition. It takes a lot of time and energy to encourage students to persevere and to keep moving forward. The end result can sometimes be life-changing. I feel these facts also reflect on teacher quality, and I know how important that is to the board, as you have addressed it many times. As a 13-year veteran, I take time to revamp, improve, redesign, and personalize lessons on a very individual level. I also take a lot of time to improve myself. I have 2 graduate degrees. One I just recently completed about 15 months ago. The other one was way long ago. And many, many, many hours of professional development. I'm a highly effective teacher. I do feel the situation of liquidated damages is broadly punitive, however, at a time when education stresses personalized, individualized learning. I work with my students on very personal bases, tailoring instruction to bolster deficits or to enhance strengths, such as you were just addressing. Personal choice is particularly inherent in the arts. I would hope this situation, or at least future situations, would be considered on a more individualized, specific basis as well. I found myself with reduced sections due to, quote-unquote, numbers of enrollment. I hoped to have the opportunity to interview for an identical position that came up at Cullis High School. I applied for the job in March. I waited during the weeks of April, before the Red for Ed situation, after the Red for Ed situation, and I waited most of May. All I wanted was an opportunity to interview. Not until after students were on summer break, I discovered I could only interpret PUSD's silence in one way. I have loved PUSD as a parent. I have been proud and worked hard as a teacher. I hung in during furlough days without pay, no raises, yet I campaigned for overrides and bonds and hammered in more signs than I can remember. This ending is very unfortunate, with Arizona teacher pay near the lowest in the nation. Do you really need to take away hard-earned wages? Please do reconsider. If not in this instance, at least moving forward as we try to carve a better path for our future. Thank you.
And our next guest speaker, Vascalones.
Good evening. I was informed by Human Resources that I would have to pay liquidated damages in the amount of $1,500. I would like to appeal this decision for the following reasons. I have worked in this district since 2006. My goal was to retire in this district as well. In 2009, I earned my master's degree and made it a goal to become an assistant principal. Since 2011, I have applied, interviewed, and been unsuccessful at my attempts to be an assistant principal in PUSD. I have worked on school and district committees, attended 2 aspiring administrator sessions, 4 years in total, have moved grade levels in schools and changed positions at the urging of my administrators to gain more experience, and yet still have not attained a position. Not only have I worked hard at trying to gain a leadership position here, but I have remained loyal to a district that I have dedicated my teaching experience to. Also, I have interviewed for instructional coach positions after being told that a lot of our new assistant principals have a coaching background. Unfortunately, I have been unsuccessful with those efforts as well. Another reason I would like to appeal the liquidated damages is because I have worked as a mentor teacher on my campus. During the 2016-2017 school year, I was asked to be a mentor teacher by my current administrator with a $1,000 stipend attached to that role, and I accepted. When John Nitschke became our new principal, I asked if I could continue my role as mentor teacher. We had 7 new teachers at our school for the 2017-2018 school year with a $1,000 stipend, and he agreed that would be a good decision. From August 2017 to May 2018, I worked continuously with the new teachers and was also responsible for 3 other committee assignments unpaid. The last week of school, I was informed by Mr. Nitschke that there was in fact no more mentor-teacher stipend that year, and he apologized for the error. It was very disheartening because that was money that I was expecting in my last paycheck of the school year. That is money that I will never get, even though I worked hard to earn it. While I know I am leaving after signing a contract, I have also been transparent with my current administration about my long-term goals and even met with Mrs. Linda Pallas Thompson about becoming an assistant principal. I have remained in constant communication with all parties involved. Please consider refunding the $1,500 that I have paid in liquidated damages. Thank you.
We appreciate you taking the time to come present to the governing board. As a result of our 2 guest speakers, we have a motion that was pulled, or a consent agenda item that was pulled. At this time, I'd like to open up the floor for discussion from the governing board.
I mean, this subject has been one that certainly been near and dear to my heart. That I want to continue to ensure that we hang our hats as a district by showing our teachers, staff that we value and respect. To have a measure that the liquidated damages should be used, obviously, to protect our students, put them in an adverse situation, not as a consequence for teachers who have been with our district for many years, have been held in high regard, received high marks in the reviews on an annual basis. I've always said, it's we have a teacher who advances their career as a result of the experience and the professional development that they've realized in our district, and they've become marketable in that regard. We should be proud of that, as they advance and move on. And they become walking billboards for the district. When asked, their experience in PUSD from other teachers, when we're in a state of, lessening number of teachers to choose from, it's beneficial, to have individuals out there who talk highly of PUSD. These situations are not easy, and I know we have a policy set forth that is in place. Again, I think for me, and I don't know if this is an appropriate time, but I would like to see a couple things. I would like to see, because currently our teachers are expected to sign their contracts in, is it March? Is that correct? End of March. So, we're asking them to sign their contracts at a very, very early time frame. And, I would like to see one of 2 things. One, if we can, take a look at, if that's the case, if we keep the March time frame as, contract signing period, do we look at, no penalties as long as the decision is made by, let's say, April 15th, which still keeps us, in a time frame that's high demand with regard to, when we're hiring new teachers for the district. And I think it still keeps us well in front of, the subsequent academic year. That said, again, for me, it is a tool to protect our students, but I'm of the opinion that if we have long-standing teachers who have shown their commitment and loyalty to this district, that what a better way to show that we've appreciated and respect and value the countless hours, the resources, that they put back into the district, by waiving liquidated damages when they advance, even if it's outside the district.
Any other comments?
Well, you all know how I feel about this. I voted no on it. I just think this is horrible policy, heartbreaking. But it is our policy. I hate it.
Any additional other comments? Any? Well, I took the liberty to watch on December 21st, 2017, the hour and a half, almost 2-hour presentation, listen to everybody's comments again. And I did have an opportunity to respond, Ms. Johnson, because I wanted to make sure that doing what the right thing to do is. And we had that conversation, and it was a decision that was the majority. And to Ms. Connick's point, we have a policy, and the right thing to do is to follow a policy that our governing board members voted on. And at that, I'm just going to leave it. Mr. Sandoval, I do have a question, and not to put you on the spot, because I rewatched it. I wanted to make sure what your valid points were presented tonight and why you would overturn your own policy that you supported in the first place.
What do you mean?
So we had an opportunity to change the policy, and so why is this situation different? Because when we look at and it's not going to change. I'll just leave it at that. It's just understanding is upholding our policy. That is important. And if we're talking about guiding principles in our strategic plan and our policies that are going to move us forward together, we need to uphold our policies. So never mind, I take my question back.
Mrs. Sayers-Martinez,
Yes.
this is to vote again on, we have a conversation on
Yep, upholding it.
today, and I don't know the legalities of the ability to, at this moment, put a hold on approval or not on the two individuals that are on there for liquidated damages, and then review policy. I don't know if we're able to do that. We're not. You have to go through that.
If somebody makes a motion to table, that would be an option. But if a board member chooses to make a motion to approve it as presented, then we would move forward. So it would be a motion for somebody to table it, and it would be a motion for somebody to pass it.
So where are we at right now on this, right now?
Let me add to that. We've debated this policy again and again and again. If it's to be revisited, somebody who was on the prevailing side of the last vote would have to ask to be it revisited. And so that's that. But we do know, because we go through this heart-wrenching experience again and again and again, that whether we decide ultimately to have it or not, we must remain consistent.
So with that, I will make a motion to approve the 9.2 Human Resources Report as presented. We have a motion by myself and a second by Ms. Pangarelli. Is there any discussion about the motion?
For me, and I just want to follow our own board policy. And if this is an appropriate time, I absolutely would like to open up another discussion around liquidated damage in the future board meeting.
So, thank you, Mr. Sandoval. We can do that. I'll make note when we get to future agenda items that we revisit QCGC, I believe it is.
Yeah.
I know that by heart. So, well, we have a motion and a second, and it is already on there. We can do a computer vote. Motion passes 5-0. Okay, and we also have administration to approve. So we're going to, we approved the consent agenda item. We're going to move to 10.2. Consideration of recommendation for administration appointments for the 2018-2019 school year. Yes, but do we want Ms. Vesely to present on who the nominations, so we want a motion and a second? We have a motion to approve the administration by Ms. Doan and a second by Ms. Connect. Is there any discussion? Ms. Doan made the motion, Ms. Connect seconded. Motion passes 5-0. Ms. Vesely, I believe you have some people to introduce to us.
Yes. Thank you, President Sehan Martinez, Governing Board members, Superintendent Pallas Thompson, and Council. Thank you once again for taking a look at our newest appointment to our administrative team here in Peoria Unified School District. I am excited to introduce Mrs. Stacy Bagwell to be appointed the position of principal at Oakwood Elementary School. She is currently serving there as assistant principal. Prior to coming to Peoria Unified School District, Ms. Bagwell taught junior high math in the Washington Elementary School District. In 2005, Ms. Bagwell made her move to the Peoria Unified School District as an 8th grade math teacher at Ira Murphy Elementary School. In October 2010, Ms. Bagwell joined the Oakwood family as assistant principal. Ms. Bagwell earned her bachelor's degree from Arizona State University and master's degree in elementary education from Northern Arizona University. I'd like to introduce Mrs. Stacy Bagwell, and I'm sure, Mrs. Bagwell, do you have a few comments you'd like to come up? I know that you have family members here with you.
Sure, please. Yes. Thank you very much, Ms. Bagwell, and your family for waiting patiently. We were scrambling along and thinking, okay, this is not going to be, so thank you so much.
Thank you, and I think they're pretty excited about that, too. I could sit here and listen about the strategic plan all night, but I don't know about that. So thank you. I'm very excited about this opportunity. I've had the pleasure of serving the Oakwood community for the last 7 years, and moving forward as the principal, I couldn't be more excited. So I really appreciate it. Thank you to my family for being here to support me. This is 3 Oakwood Raiders right here, too. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Excellent.
I know we have a few other administrators here that were on the consent agenda. Mrs. Pallas Thompson, did you want to introduce, or would you like me to? All right. I'd like to introduce Mrs. Carly Borland. Would you like to stand, please? Mrs. Borland was just named Assistant Principal and Athletic Director at Raymond S. Kellis, and we're excited to have her coming on board, coming from Centennial High School. And then also in our audience tonight, we have Mr. Christopher Vale. will be working right alongside Mrs. Bagwell at Oakwood Elementary School. And you are coming from Sunrise Mountain High School, the former band director there. So we're excited to have you. Thank you. Congratulations. Thank you. And did I miss anyone? All right. Thank you for this opportunity.
Yeah.
I think we're done with our administrative movements.
Awesome. Well, congratulations. Thank you so much, and go enjoy your dinners.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. I appreciate your patience through that shift and flexibility. So let's go ahead and, do we want to resume study session or continue with the agenda? Just. Strategic, okay. Works for me. Shift gears. Yeah. Are we going to try to tap? No, we're not. I'm at 5 hours and 10 minutes. Yeah. Yes. They have us beat, so let's not get that. 5 hours and 10 minutes. Only 2 hours behind.
Well, thank you, Ms. Sayar Martinez. On that note, we'll move right along. We completed the student success perspective. Now we're going to move on to safety and well-being. I wanted to point out that Mr. Steve Savoy is the leader of that group and actually led the discussion at our retreat and also with the all admin meeting to get feedback there. Tonight, he's not able to join us tonight, so Allie Bridgewater is going to present this piece of the presentation.
Well, thank you. Can we change the slide
yes,
up there?
we can do
That'd be great. Thank you. Well, I hope I do Mr. Savoy justice. So I will try and go through this bit by bit, and hopefully we'll have questions and some open
Well, it
and
looks like he's
honest
doing his
dialogue.
power pose there.
That's
so-
right. He's there. We're
He's
just right there. Of course, the definition, maintaining safe, inviting, nurturing, and respectful environments for students, staff, and community. As you'll look under, I know we had some discussion about the programs, but this is just what's been discussed. Steve delineates it by goals and by dates. By August of 2019, the district will have implemented a comprehensive emergency preparedness plan at all facilities. So as you look through here and you read the next two, you're going to look at kind of like a response, kind of a mode, how we respond to crisis and how we respond and audit our facilities. And then by the third one, we'll be looking at kind of on the other side of that and a preventive type of, and identifying and preventing perhaps and assessing students and their emotional health. So in beginning here, I've taken some notes, and I don't have that Boston accent, so I can't woo you with that like Mr. Savoy does, but I'm just going to go through kind of the phases of that. And the first part is emergency preparedness plan development. And what that looks like is, to start out with, next week, Mr. Savoy and Mr. Croto and 8 other people on that committee or task force, so to speak, will be receiving crisis response training in Pennsylvania. This is a national certified and recognized training, and while they're there, they're also going to be updating our crisis response manuals for every single site and every single facility. These updated manuals will be provided to every school and every site within our district. So we're just not looking at every school site, we're looking at every facility, whether it be the district office, we're assessing our facilities, transportation, the Choya Annex. So that's going to be some intense training, and we're looking forward to what that brings back. We also will have a process to monitor and evaluate the execution of all school responses to crisis plans and drills. Basically, we know that we all, at the school sites, we have drills. We want to know how those drills are going. We want to know when they're going to be done, and we want to evaluate them, and we want to make sure that students are prepared for whatever crisis happens on site. And we want our community to know that's going on as well. I think we could do a better job at communicating what our crisis plan is, what our emergency plan is. I think the community wants to know that we're just not preparing for a fire drill. We're preparing for a lot of different drills that unfortunately in our country have occurred and have raised this level of awareness.
Without terrifying.
Without terrifying people. That's an excellent point. Another point is that all administrators will be trained through Incident Command System modules. That sounds pretty impressive. This is what they're being trained on right now or next week. There will be 4 modules altogether, and the first one will be taking place on July 25th at our back-to-school administrator meetings. And they all have to do with crisis response training. In fact, July 25th will be solely focused, I don't know if you know this yet, on the curriculum side, as Safety Day. Okay, good. That is the only thing that we're going to focus on with all administrators is safety. Not only how we respond to crisis, but what the plan is, and I've been working with Dr. Bell in terms of what we're doing to also prevent something, intervening on dangerous behaviors. So those are, that's something that we've heard from our community. We've heard that this is a nationwide issue, and I know that our superintendent, unfortunately after the incident in Florida, we put a task force together, and we started really looking at what we're doing and what we're not doing. The second part of this is, as you'll see, is implementing a facility assessment of all of our facilities in the district. And kind of what does that really mean? And so we've broken that down into kind of 2 separate items. And Steve and I were talking about that this morning on the telephone. The first part of it is called a facility safety vulnerability audit. And I think that's kind of a gutsy term to use. Are we vulnerable at some of our sites? Why are we vulnerable, and how do we fix that vulnerability? So every school in our district will have a thorough audit specific to their own site. Okay, I used to have the unique opportunity to be the principal at the oldest facility in the district and then the newest facility. I can't say that anymore because since I was at Liberty, we've had a couple schools built since then. But the difference is you're keenly aware of the difference in regards to safety when you work at a building that was built in 1918 as opposed to a building that was built in 2006. So this audit will be focused on areas of vulnerability, safety, and access. And not only access from the outside, but how we check people in, how we monitor how long they've been there, and how we check them out. An outside qualified expert will be partnering with our district during all site visits. And then we will take their recommendations as well. And as you know, Mr. Croto will be intricately involved in all that. Another part of it is what's called curb appeal. And what that kind of means is that this will be another type of an audit, but this time we'll be looking at fencing, striping for buses and emergency vehicle access throughout each campus and each district site facility. Ensuring that facilities, no matter what age they are all up to date in regards to safety standards. And Steve wanted me to make sure and say this part. Everything is part of everything. So as we accent, okay, and I go, okay, can you talk to me more about that? But everything is part of everything in terms of we want to get this done as quickly as possible so that when we do go for this bond, we are able to identify and tell the community what our plans are with bond funds and how it's going to address some of the concerns we have in this district, not only for, again, school sites, but for all facilities. The next part is, you'll see there, by August of 2019, the district will assess, create, and implement social and emotional programs to enhance student well-being. Also, Mr. Savoy wanted me to point out that this was at the forefront of everybody's mind during, when we gathered the administrators together. This was the part they felt needed the most attention. Yes, we're worried about facilities. Yes, we're worried about if we're up to code and up to standards, and can we protect other people coming on campus. But in terms of really assessing where students are emotionally, psychologically, this is something that we really need to work on. And, you know, Dr. Bell and I had a lengthy meeting today, and I'm sure we'll be part of many more, because that does include curriculum, and it does include teaching teachers and teaching students and teaching administrators how to deal with this thing called mental health, social awareness.
So there's a nexus in my mind between
Okay.
well-being and aesthetics, because if our schools look
Absolutely.
welcoming, they look safe, they look put together, they look fresh, that has to do with the emotions that are attached to that place. If it's a place where people want to be, if it's a place where they feel safe, where they feel welcomed, that's an important thing. So
That's an excellent point. I just had my last evaluation with Mrs. Alice Cushing, principal at Ira Murphy, and I talked about the things that she has done on that campus, how it looks, how it feels, how excited the teachers are, the different programs she's set there, and you walk in there and you feel just that it's a great place to be.
And we want to put in elements that can help foster safety.
Yes.
But there was a great op-ed in Ed Week about going too far, and if you put elements in students' view, like, let's say, a worst-case scenario in my mind would be a metal detector.
Right?
You're sending the message that this is not a safe place. And we need to be cognizant of that.
Our principals did state that. They said, you know, the difference between creating a safe environment and an environment that looks institutionalized. So that is, we have to be, yes, very cognizant.
It sends the message, we expect violence here.
Right.
We don't want to do that.
Right. We've had, Dr. Bell and I, preliminary meetings to establish a needs assessment at each site as to where we are in addressing a tiered support system to those students in need. There has to be different types of supports for different types of students, Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3, and it doesn't always equate. And I see you, Heather, shaking your head because you deal with this a lot. I've seen you, you're amazing, on how to make kids see and accept consequences so that their behavior will change and grow from that.
And
Isn't
isn't that a cultural thing?
Yes.
That it's everybody's job on
Yes.
campus, even the other
Everybody's.
students, to be looking out for each other.
Yes.
It's everybody's job. The lunch lady, the principal, the
Security,
substitute teacher, right,
substitutes,
everybody.
Yes. We
On that
have.
note, real quick, Danielle, I look
Yes.
forward to your next hashtag. I like the one culture of preparedness hashtag, but whatever one you come up with, I look.
Oh, no, she's already a mile ahead of me.
All about the hashtag.
We have hired a lead nurse, that is going to be her assignment. She's the lead nurse. A coordinator for PBIS and MTSS, which is positive behavior. It's a multi-tiered system of support. And have a posted position for a lead counselor. And we're also trying to find funds for a social worker. Once all those positions are solidified, we will focus on establishing a systematic approach in intervening with students and families that are in need of support or that are in crisis. We are developing anti-bullying modules that are grade appropriate for all students. We believe that's really important. We are still researching those. Is it the Sandy Hook promise, see something, say something, which is very delineated per grade level, rather simplistic on how to roll out to teachers and easy to understand. We also are requiring every school to turn in their specific behavior management plan. That is not a punitive approach, but a positive-based behavior intervention plan, which many schools already have, capturing kids' hearts, the leader in me, character counts, PBIS. Many of our schools have already gone through that training and redo the training every time a new staff member comes on board. Like you said, whether it's a secretary, substitutes that come on board, hey, we're a Capturing Kids' Hearts school. We all speak the language. This is what's expected. Each grade level, from class to class, we are speaking the same language in terms of behavior modification. Lastly, this is what I think is exciting. Meeting with you is exciting too, but this is, you were a close second. I know. We have strengthened our partnership with Southwest Behavioral Institute to expand to 4 more schools within our district, so that's huge. We have, thanks to your department, through a federal programs grant, secured training in the following areas. There will be training for teachers and administrators in suicide prevention training, youth mental health first aid training, and you've probably heard this in other districts, trauma-informed care for educators. So we're really excited about that, and I know I shouldn't be doing this, but I want to take this time to thank Miss Carrie Monica. She's been working with our task force. She is actually our contact with Southwest Behavioral, and she will be teaching the modules and the training modules for 2 of those areas. And I want to thank Mr. Savoy for beginning the partnership, you also, with Southwest Behavioral Institute. Again, these are, in our meeting, we talked a long time about doing a needs assessment at every site and doing a thorough program and involving curriculum and involving special ed and involving the academic side of the house, the instruction side of the house, in order to fully meet the needs of all kids. And so what is the support of the behavior interventionist? What do they do on every site? What do the psychologists do? What training do administrators have and teachers? So that is our kind of big focus areas that we have put together through input from our teachers and our district leaders. So,
Yeah,
questions?
this is very exciting. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
It's exciting to understand, just being sensitive to understanding, again, the diversity of our students and understanding just all those nuances that will help us be smarter with regard to serving our student population and, again, putting them on a path of success. I think, in addition to the partnership with Southwest Behavioral Health, which I think is great, I'm sure you're already thinking in this direction, but when we talk about student well-being, yeah, part of it is the mental aspect of it, the behavioral aspect of it, but also, just simple toiletries, food, clothing. I met with the city of Peoria a couple of weeks ago. They have I know they have a food box program that they hand out food. I think it's on a weekly basis, if I'm not mistaken, but they're also looking for locations to be able to give out more food. From understanding, I think it's trying to remember what nonprofit name, but there's like 200 million pounds of food that they want to give in a zip code here in Peoria. So I think as we take a look at other partners and understanding what they're doing and how we can certainly enhance their programs and certainly enhance our wraparound services for our kids, leveraging some of the activities that are already taking place, and even extending our facilities, whether it be a gym, to be a distribution point, for some of those programs that, like the city of Peoria has, I think is be smart on our behalf.
I've been working with our grant writer in preliminary conversations about that. I was happy that Cheryl was able to find a grant that we could, in fact, have a planning year next year with this team of people to generate a wraparound services physical space for things like clothes closets, back snack program, mental health services, et cetera. So as we look for hopefully some support in doing that, we would be able to expand our services not only to kids but to their families.
Okay. The positions that you were talking about, Alan, earlier, was that per campus or total?
For,
You're talking about the social worker and
no, the lead counselor would be a lead counselor for the entire district, one person, the lead nurse for the entire district. So we would not yet have a lead nurse. Every school either has a nurse or, an LPN on the campus, but a lot of times they come from the medical field, and I think being a school nurse is different.
Yeah.
And so having a lead nurse that can go and sit and shadow, and then also how can we use the nurse in some of these, because sometimes at the elementary level and sometimes at the high school level, the kids go to the nurse.
Yeah.
And he or she is the one that is taking the information and probably involving them in that tiered system of support with behavior interventionists, counselors, a lead, the coordinator of other services that we would offer, and bringing them into the fold of providing services.
gotcha. Yeah, and I think even taking a look at, community liaisons, this may be
Sure.
behavioral interventionists, fit this mold, but, having those individuals who will help broaden the bandwidth, of these efforts on a campus where it makes sense.
Right.
So I am so excited about hiring a social worker, but whoever this person is better be a really good leader, because he or she is going to have to do a lot of delegating to get that level of expertise filtered down into all of our sites. So I'm very excited about that. I'm very excited about us in education in general. There's a heightened awareness about adverse childhood experiences and how that affects kids not only socially and emotionally but academically. So everything is everything, or something, whatever. So that's really great. Mrs. Thompson and Mrs. Airy and I recently found each other accidentally at the same peace conference, and they talked about peace education and peace literacy, and that could be something that permeates a lot of what we do, how to find, how to de-escalate situations, how to avoid violence, there's a long list of ways that we can help foster peaceful relationships interpersonally at school sites and in our broader community. So there's an opportunity there, and it just so happens last weekend I heard the president of the National School Boards Association relay his story because his school district burned down in the California fires. And it's something nobody ever, thought would happen. But literally students, teachers, board members, homeless because their homes burned down. And so he gave some practical advice that I'll share. We talked about a disaster plan, but to think about the things that might never think. We're not in the middle of a forest, but there could still be fires, right? There could be cyber problems. There could be, who knows? But to think about all those different things. He said, be sure that you have the right insurance. Make sure that you have enough insurance to cover if something goes bad. Would we have the capacity to rebuild? Is a question we need to ask ourselves. There needs to be a succession plan. We've been caught with that recently, so we definitely need to know, not just for staff members, but at the site level and on the board, what their board had to do, because their board members, many of them were homeless. They didn't have access to the internet, And so what they decided to do is consolidate the power into the one board member who could communicate. So the rest of the board members gave that individual that power in short term. Data and documents, yes, our test scores, those things that we're held accountable for keeping over time, ensuring that they can survive a disaster. And they said, take panoramic videos of all of our facilities, because you can't remember everything you have or what it looks like. So, okay, that's that for that report. I'm done.
I think, and just lastly, I'm sorry, just to, just in speaking with the amount of people I have, that to identify trauma is different with every child and every human being. So trauma can manifest itself in many ways, and something as may sound insignificant to us in terms of just getting on with facing the day might be extremely traumatic to somebody else. So I think that trauma training will be extremely beneficial.
And a paradigm shift is when we have students who are acting out with behavioral problems, instead of asking what's wrong with you, say what happened to you.
Exactly.
I just had, one comment. It was a conversation I had with Mr. Savoy several months ago, and he had told me about the student IDs, and I don't know if we do that now, but to put various hotline numbers on the back. So if a student,
talked about that.
Yeah, I mean, it would be a very cheap way of getting some information out there.
Right. I agree.
I will add just a couple things. Emmitsburg, Maryland, those of you who are going, everything that Kathy brought up, you will discuss things in your emergency preparedness plan. And actually, some of those emergency courses are available for everybody online on the FEMA website. Some the prerequisites are free.
Okay.
So site administrators can even take them. And then the big thing is the vernacular. Everybody's using the same lingo.
Yes.
Even governing board members. That's huge. But some takeaways that I would like to see is, the first one is on August 20th, the last bullet point, social and emotional programs to enhance student well-being. My only question is, why don't we have staff in that conversation? And maybe not enhance student well-being, but when I think of Mr. Sandoval's example of the Peoria box, some of our staff employees need resources at different times of their lives for whatever reason. If we're looking at our definition, student, staff, and community, could we consider adding them to that objective? When we look at baseline and measurable data, I would like to see what the district standards look like across the board, that being a baseline, and then comparing it from school to school site. The grant writer position, you already brought it up. I would like to see a report, since this is now a strategic plan, how much money we locate with the grants. That would be a great story to tell, which would lend itself to one of my bullet points, is communication and marketing. As we venture on this, we are leading the pack. This type of not on my watch, advisory committee, community involvement, sending a team to FEMA is not happening in our state. We are so comprehensive that I would love to see we are the model and driving force. Everybody's watching Peoria as, how do we keep our kids safe? Well, let's look at Peoria. So how do we market that? And the last piece, another school district is doing already that we can learn from, and I want to say it's Paradise Valley, substitute training. Substitute teachers that come into our district, are they familiar with our training practices? Do they know that if they see a child, where do they go? They have an emergency. So what does substitute training look like in well-being? And that's it.
And I know just because John is the strategic plan, we'll have to monitor it and make sure that so we got that as part of the plan too, right there. Okay.
And Ally, can I just say that I also wanted to put on the record the work of one of our parents who kind of moved things, was Kelly Caballo.
Yes.
Please, so she's, you know,
We've been exchanging emails and I've been.
correct. And I know I know you do, so I just wanted to remind you that.
Have lots of fun. You'll love
Thank you.
it.
Well, if I could, I'd like you to move us along.
We only have 9 areas.
No, only 2 more. I did want to point out a couple things really quickly as we go along here. One thing is I'm just delighted to hear you, Ms. Connect, talk about, and also Ms. Sayar Martinez, about the disaster recovery issue. I've been a disaster recovery person before, and it is one of the things that nobody ever wants to talk about or spend a nickel on.
And that's what that class talks about.
Yeah, and and you'll see that we thought about that in our next section here. It's very critically important that we talk about that. And then, Ms. Connect, also with regard to your earlier comments about programs and goals and all that, I thought maybe after a couple of these you might start seeing a pattern, and that is that each one of the programs is stated basically in the form of a goal. And then what happens is that the projects then, even these programs are big, and so you can't do, we've put by August of 2019 and all of them, not to say that everything will be done by then, but that we can say we have the program by then. And what the specifics of what we want to see accomplished comes out in the form of projects. So the projects have objectives that are measurable, and then they end up defining success, successfully achieving the goal that's stated in the project. Does that make, the program, does that make sense?
I call them goals, but I'll
Yeah.
go with programs.
Okay, well, and I just wanted to see it, make sure that you saw the method to our madness here. So, okay, moving on to the next one, I'm going to introduce Ms. Michelle Myers to talk about our stewardship of community resources. This is a fairly meaty one, so we'll have to try to step through it quickly. As opposed to the others that were real quick. Oh, yes.
Well, good evening and thank you. I'm appreciative of the opportunity to cover this strategic initiative area with the board. And John wasn't kidding. This area has 6 potential programs that we'll be talking about this evening and that the executive committee looked at during our retreat. And when we look at the definition of solidifying and adhering to effective policies, practices, and accountability for district resources, well, what are resources? Well, they're monetary. They're also capital, physical, plant, and their staff. So it's truly the holistic definition of our resources, and we're accountable to our community for funding us and allowing us to have those resources. And so one area, we've touched on it a little bit as we talked about some of the other strategic perspectives, and the first one I'll talk about is cybersecurity, which we're now defining as cyber resilience. And I think we've all seen the headlines, the various retailers that have had the data breach or personally identifiable information's been stolen. Educational institutions aren't immune from that. In fact, one of our county institutions had a very large breach a number of years ago. And if we were to have a data breach, it would not only impact business operations, but it would result in a material liability on our financial statements. It would be significant. And so we're aware of that, and that priority has actually been discussed outside of our strategic plan. And in fact, John has headed up the forming of a cyber resilience team that has already been meeting for quite some time through the spring. So we've already got a little bit of this work behind us. And with that, that dovetails very nicely into some of the potential programs that we're talking about this evening, because ultimately it goes beyond passwords. And we want to ensure that we're covered in all areas. And so the first is a goal or program would be by August of 2019, the district will have implemented a data management and cyber resilience program using that new phrasing versus cybersecurity. And what does that mean? Well, first off, you have to start off with a framework. And that framework is going to help you guide the staff and team through the process. But also you have to have policies in place. And those policies have to be specific to your objectives and goals. And within some of those policies and frameworks, there will be a cyber incident response plan. So similar to the disaster recovery we're talking about, well, we certainly hope we never have a data breach. But if you have exposure, you have to have a plan to respond concisely and clearly. Who do you call when you become aware of something? You have to notify law enforcement. You have to notify your insurance carrier, et cetera. And then there's the issue of notifying folks who may have been impacted. So all that has to be embedded into your procedures, but you're trying never to get to that point. by developing a program that minimizes the risk for that to occur. Then, we also look not only at our network and ensuring it's as secure as possible, but the relationships that we have with third parties that we might share data with, be it our students' data, be it our staff's data. We need to understand what those third parties do, and we have a process for that. And what we want to do is further develop that third-party information agreement that we have in place, and perhaps update our PO terms to talk about expectations and data security, things of that nature, as well as to roll out comprehensive training for our employees and for our students that would be required at the beginning of the school year. I mentioned it goes beyond a password. Well, yes, you have to have robust, complex passwords that you don't share with other people, but also clean desk policies to ensure staff understand that sometimes there are things like phishing emails and to be cautious before you click. Things of that nature, simple in theory, but oftentimes people are easily tricked, and those bad actors out there are very good at tricking people, mimicking that there's someone that they know. They might spoof someone. Another school district actually fell victim to a third party contacting staff members and pretending it was the superintendent, calling and asking for W-2 information. So we want to make sure our staff are trained to identify when there's something suspicious that comes to them. So those are 3 areas under that first program. And with that, this is a very meaty area. We've started the process, but it's going to be embedded into our strategic plan moving into the new year. Another candidate program is that by August of 2019, the district will have implemented a program management and budget alignment process. That's a somewhat complex definition of a program. Well, what does that mean? Well, it's developing a way to evaluate the effectiveness of programs, not only through the development stage and the implementation stage, execution, but also the postmortem look back. And what I mean by that is to develop and utilize standard metrics, to have the ability to do data analytics and to define key performance indicators. So when we make decisions to allocate scarce resources, we ensure that our long-term objective and what we're trying to achieve is fully met by the expenditure of those funds, and then you have the ability to look back and quantify what your return on investment is. It's not only looking at the financial outlay, the organizational capacity rather, but also the human capacity when we make a decision to implement a program. Do we have the organizational capacity from a staff perspective in addition rather to a funding perspective? So that's an example of a program effectiveness evaluation program. And a key performance indicator is something that's measurable and provides value that demonstrates how effectively an organization is achieving key business objectives. So our third potential program is by August of 2019, the district will have implemented a comprehensive policy auditing and update process. I love the word auditing, and the fact that we have this in this potential program made me smile. Yes. Say that fast 3 times. But it's true, and what does that mean? Well, our policy manual is currently managed by Arizona School Board Association and Policy Bridge, just like every other school district. However, we sometimes have our own unique Peoria-specific policies that we need to embed. We've talked about a few tonight that we might want to visit. There's a management piece. There's the management of ensuring updates from ASBA are maintained timely and implemented into our policy, but also where we identify those specific Peoria needs. Cybersecurity is one. Policy sometimes lags behind the times, and cybersecurity is actually something that's not really embedded yet in the ASBA policy. That's something that Peoria is looking at through our framework, and we would add to district policy. Another example is there are requirements under the Uniform Grant Guidance for federal funds that require certain policies to be in place. That's Peoria specific. We'd want to make sure we're in compliance with that. Another one might be when we do business with outside organizations, community partnerships, parent support organizations, there may need to be Peoria specific policies regarding that. Strategic plan projects we talked about this evening, making it PUSD specific. And then the next candidate program is by August 2019, the district will have implemented an employee group classification and compensation program. And that program would involve a review of our employee groups from a job description perspective, from a classification perspective, because some of our job descriptions may be a number of years old and job requirements change, technology changes, external requirements change, as well as looking at our salary schedules. Our budget team does a wonderful job looking at how we allocate scarce resources each year. And last year, during the budget process, we talked about for fiscal 1920, making it a point to look at those salary schedules. Well, we feel it's so important that we'd like to embed that into our strategic plan, where we're looking at the starting steps, when were they last updated, how do we compare to other organizations. It's always good to have current data and to benchmark off of your peers. However, with that, we also have to be very mindful that we have finite resources. And based on the information we get from that evaluation, we will only have a certain amount of capacity to address what the recommendations are from that study. And some of these programs might involve the partnership of a third party coming in to assist us, as well as district staff, and that's something that we can look at as we continue through the strategic planning process. The next candidate program is that by August of 2019, the district will have implemented a business continuity and disaster recovery program, and we've talked about that tonight already. I always use the Katrina example, which I think is a bit archaic because, obviously we don't have hurricanes here, but that was always a great example if you physically couldn't get to your place of business due to a flood or a fire, epidemic, or maybe a 500-year flood. You're out in the desert. If we physically could not get to the district office or to one of our elementary schools or high schools, how would we conduct business? How would we pay our vendors? How would we process payroll? That's where you need to embed those variables into your plan and how you would address each variable, which stakeholders would be called, how would you remotely and securely set up business. So that's what the business continuity and disaster recovery program would address. And we do already have an IT disaster recovery plan. In a few minutes, we'll be talking about the performance audit and the closeout of that audit. And one of the recommendations was that IT implement and test information technology recovery plan, which we have done. But it's beyond IT. It's the business operations, as I mentioned. It's the stakeholder groups, both on the operations side and the academic side. And then finally, the sixth program is by August 2019, the district will have a facility utilization program. And that would include program development to review district facilities, to identify if we are truly achieving optimal use of square footage, for function, capacity, to identify opportunities for improvement or new activities or outcomes. So that's a summary of the 6 areas of focus that we have to be good stewardships of our community resources. And I'll open it up now to the board for questions before I ask my final 2 questions.
I just have to comment. Well, the other areas can be kind of exciting, the achievement, whatever, and I know Michelle loves the audit, whatever. If we do this right, this takes what John's big deal always is, we are not as sophisticated as we need to be. This really sets us and sets a new superintendent, which is for, if you're saying, well, have you implemented a data management plan? Actually, this is what we have for it. How about program management? Well, this is, and those become the questions back. Well, we have a program management system. How might you take it to the next step to implement X, Y, Z? And each of these areas, I am not excited like Michelle excited, but excited to know that if we really have them in the works, we're at the next level that we need to be. And it's and this is what stewardship, I think, means. So it's amazing.
I'm excited because, yeah, I'm excited because I see dollar signs. I see dollar signs. You mentioned if there's an emergency, where do you move? That's part of that class too, that you even talk about a little bit about finance and how do you get payroll out. That's awesome that you guys are talking about that. And optimal utilization, I had wrote, that may come full fruition where we have to make some tough decisions and looking at our resources and our school sites. The number 2 bullet I wanted to highlight, implement a program management and budget alignment process. I would really like to take a look. Our teachers do a phenomenal job, and our staff, our school site staff, of spreading every dollar as far as we can get it. But if we really take a look at lean management, an opportunity to continue to improve on processes, when staff understand the why and the costs related to, oh, this copy did not come out right the first 3 times, I'm going to switch it over, and when you times that times 180 days and you add up all that paper, the actual cost that is put upon her or him if they're using their own money, but then on the district, if each site has a budget and we look at that lean management system, then they understand the why and start making informed decisions. It's great to see that our equipment for the bond, those printers are part of that conversation. Those are ancient, by the way, those printers. And the last thing is, I know Ms. Pangarelli always brings this up, as the data on research initiatives. The governing board is constantly being brought up. Should we approve this research project by Midwestern or ASU? And if we can get our policies in that program to align, then there's a standard that when you guys present an initiative or a research project, we already know that you guys already vetted it to our program. So with that.
Michelle? It's a lot of stuff. I'm kidding. Sorry.
I think having the cookie in your mouth made that just priceless.
So, absolutely mission critical, without question, not only from a safety regard, but as we take a look at best practices from a business efficiencies. Talked about the optimizing our utilization per square foot. Yes, every foot in this district has a dollar side to it, right? Understanding that, I think, and I know throughout everything that we talked about thus far, Mr. Day and team, I think you've discussed the continuous improvement and how we will, from a frequency perspective, continually to communicate certain best practices. You talked about the emails coming in, check before you click, I think is what you said, or something to that extent, right? But, how those just get sent out to all the teachers and staff, whether it's a newsletter or whatever the method is. But, I think that's where, we'll realize change. And lasting change. I mean, it's a lot of information to take in, but I think if we communicate it effectively, and our processes are seamless and efficient. Yeah, I agree with Monica. I mean, we'll be a district that continues to be sought out, held in high regard, not just from a parent perspective and their students, put them in the best situation to be successful, but as a model for other districts to follow. So, thank you for all the information. It's absolutely.
Even I'm a little excited about this. And I'm normally the curriculum gal, but one thing, cybersecurity is set to be one of the West Valley's biggest up-and-coming industries. It's really exciting. And so I was just thinking about this the other day in conversation. One opportunity I think we have is to, in that area of cybersecurity where we're teaching staff members to think before you click, is integrating into our curriculum some protocols and ethics to our students? Because isn't every single one of those laptops a potential crack in the armor? So how do we teach everybody who's touching technology, whether they're 5 or whether they're 75, to be on the team, right? To be the eyes and the ears, and to have the skill set not to accidentally, give all of our stuff to a foreign country, right?
We, Ms. Connect, thank you. We actually had a meeting of the cybersecurity, cyber resilience team today, and one of the 4 projects that you saw listed there is in the area of training and awareness. And the team is really putting together some fantastic ideas to get at what you're talking about. So moving away from okay, we got to take mandatory training once a year, we'll click through some slides and take a test, but really stuff that gets at differentiating by grade level. So what cybersecurity is important to a 5th grader is maybe a little different than what's important to a senior or important to a 5-year-old. And so once again, this idea of personalizing and differentiating applies here as well. So I think you're going to be real pleased with what happens there.
I would think not only internal protocol, to Kathy's point, but, even, how our teachers and staff use their own personal social media could potentially, leak, certain information.
We actually, as part of that same conversation, and I talked to Danielle about this a little bit earlier today, we talked about cybersecurity, cyber resilience awareness as a public service to our community. And so the idea of reaching out with various forms of social media as well as print materials and other things like that to educate our community on how to be safe with digital equipment and so forth. I was going to mention, as far as being a model, we're also going to be applying toward the end of this year for a national recognition as a trusted learning environment. And so that will be something that no district in Arizona has received that certification, and only a few in the nation have. So that's our goal for this.
I do have one question. Is this where the organizational chart will fit under? We look at our district's organization chart.
Well, I don't know that it needs to fit any particular place, but clearly as we think of stewardship of community resources, and that talks to alignment of responsibility and accountability. So it makes sense that when we want to talk about organizational structural changes, that this would be the umbrella under which we would do that.
Thank you.
Okay, and now, saving the best for last, I think, is Ms. Danielle Area is going to talk about our final strategic perspective area, which of course is a community connection.
I don't know, I'm tired. Do you think we should adjourn?
Let's call it good. Well, thank you, John. And given the hour, I will, try to have a little bit of brevity here with what I share. But I want to give time certainly for some feedback. And I like to think this is the most exciting area, but I will point out that this is actually the only area where you can see included right there in the definition. We are calling out the fact that this area is critical to support every other area. And you've all mentioned this area when we've talked about every other focus as part of our strategic plan. So I just want to make sure that you know that we see this as really weaving through everything else that we're doing. We know we need community involvement, partnerships, and solid communication to support everything that we're going to do. So I did just want to call that out, bring that to your attention before we proceed. And as you'll go through, you'll see 3 primary programs listed there. I'm going to talk just a little bit about each one and a couple examples of projects that might fall underneath them. The first one you might find odd to see on there, given the definition that John Gay gave you, related to programs typically don't have a start and an end. And here we reference, of course, the upcoming bond election, and you think of that as something that takes place on a particular date and then ends. We know, given where our community is at right now, given the feedback, given all that is going on in the educational climate in Arizona, that we need to do a really good job of making sure our community has awareness and understanding of where we're spending our resources, which of course goes hand in hand with what you just heard discussed there. So this is not talking about this is talking about communicating what a bond means if it passes, what a bond means as it fails, and it's talking about continuing that conversation long beyond Election Day, that our community needs to be aware of how their funding will be spent. And then, of course, following Election Day, of course, if that initiative isn't successful, they need to be aware of what we are doing about that and what our community can expect from us as a district. So we feel that that conversation is critically important and that everybody understands this and something that you all have identified as something that's on the horizon for us, what that means to our community. So that's really what we're talking about when we talk about the facts related to the results either way for our community. The next one, as we kind of move down, talks about process, progress, and engagement around leadership in our district. And that's really what it is if you boil it down to. We know that you made leadership in our district and superintendent search as one of your top priorities as a governing board, something you've been discussing, a search that you've engaged in. But I'll say the project related to that isn't as simple as finding the next superintendent for our district. That's not really what we're breaking it down to mean. What we mean when we're putting a project together around this one are a lot of that feedback that you just received from our community, from our staff, and from the firm that you've hired is pointing out a number of things to you. And you heard a little bit of that shared, and I know you got the full report with that shared, and it's kind of diving into that a little bit and looking at that and saying, what are some branding and marketing aspects that we need to look at so that we can help build awareness in our community and to all of our stakeholders around what it is that we're trying to accomplish in our district. And we know that goes hand in hand with leadership, because certainly we want to make sure that what's next for us is a candidate pool that is excited to come to Peoria, that when they ask, well, but you don't have a strategic plan, where's your strategic plan? We can say, we have a strategic plan, or we have a transition plan in place. So it's looking at some of those areas, whether they're glowing or not, and trying to tackle some of those and how we're presenting ourselves to our district. And we feel like that goes hand in hand, obviously, with solid leadership. I think you could insert the everything is everything quote into each and every one of the things that we've talked about, but I think that's key and critical there. Thirdly, and you heard Kendra touch on this just a little bit, is this talk about a community education department. It's called a number of different things in a number of different districts. I know you're no stranger to what that is or what that means, because in fact, I've presented that to you, I think now 3 times in the past on what that could look like for our district. We've put it on here because we're talking about getting serious about talking about doing this, and that's taking the next year to really appropriately plan for the implementation of that program. We know that can look like a lot of different things. And in fact, when we shared this with our administrators, this was the area that they got most excited about because they know that it means resources to support the work that they're trying to do in the classroom. And community education can really encompass a number of different things. I won't necessarily go through each and every one of them, but we know a lot of it are the programs and the resources we already have, like preschool, like the before and after school program we run in our Glendale schools, a lot of the different summer camps and things, the couple of community resource centers that we have, and it's taking some of those, it's aligning them under one place, running them like a business, and then looking around to say, what are the other needs in our community, some of which you heard Kendra speak to, some of the social, emotional things, some of the resource extensions that we know our kids and families need, meeting some of those basic needs so they can be successful in the classroom, and that's what that whole thing comes back to. So it's talking about taking this next year as this project to appropriately plan for that. And we've got a lot of things already underway for that. Grant writing kind of in the works, looking at some of those key areas. We know there's other grants that we can likely go after that fall within this realm as well. So this is the tip of the iceberg, as you all know, of what community means and what it's all about. We were just identifying some real key things that were bubbling up to the surface, again, for just the next 15-ish to 18 months as we're looking at this transition of what areas could really be kind of a key focus here. So I share those with you, and I guess lastly say, much of this is likely not probably surprising to you all, nor surprising to our community. I think what it is really taking work we had intended to do all along, and I think you could say this really, if I can, John, say, of all 4 of these areas, and as you see how they relate, work we had intended to do all along, but structured in such a way that our staff and our community can see these intersections and can see how these will help make their child successful. So I think that's what we're trying to accomplish, if I can kind of summarize it a little for you. So comments related to those, 3 priority areas, knowing, of course, this area will also be supporting the work of, I tried to get her to tack off a couple of those, but, it's all such important work, but we'll be supporting the work of all 3 of those other areas as well, and that will fall under here too. So thoughts on that and prioritization would be great.
Yeah, I think, Danielle, would this include, and could it be considered, maybe not a program or a goal, maybe more of a tactic, I guess, but, a comprehensive marketing and communication, right? So I agree, it pleases me to hear when you talk about, the partnerships and being a resource for the community. Yes, we have an obligation to our students, to staff, but, I think as a district, Peoria, I think there's a level of the community as well. Open up our doors as a resource. But that said, the frequency of our communication to our stakeholders to maintain and nurture that relationship is critical, when it comes down to the ask, right? If we're always in a situation where we're only reaching the audience to ask for a bond or ask, for $1 or whatever, right? It kind of becomes one-sided. But, having that frequent dialogue, with our stakeholders across the board, that allows for those sometimes courageous and tough conversations to go without question. But now, so there's that, kind of just how it looks, grassroots, social media, seasonality, et cetera. But do you have for advertising dollars for the district?
My department has a small budget. We do a little tiny bit of advertising, mostly on social media, just because of scarce resources, but certainly we may be looking to allocate a few more of those dollars in this direction as we're trying to make sure that these critical things that we're working on, everybody knows about them. And so that's kind of more so how we think about that and about our advertising. So we do a little bit more of a grassroots, but we don't have, I guess, to answer your question directly, have a set advertising budget.
Yeah, and the only reason I ask is that, when you take a look at an audience, and one of the variables is whether it be life stage or culturally, lifestyle, everybody kind of engages with the brand differently, right? So the communication channel, while some might be conducive to social media or TV or radio, others may be more favor print or, even billboards, et cetera, right? I mean, it just helps broaden our reach a little bit. So that's why I asked about the advertising budget.
So I think when I read this, I misunderstood. And you brought a lot of clarity when you were talking about it. You're really talking about our district's connection to the broader community. My mind was thinking about communications with parents. So if I can elaborate just a little bit, because maybe it doesn't fit under here, but we should be thinking about it. So I think when we have parents or grandparents, or they're thinking they want to be heard, they want to gain understanding, or they want to get satisfaction. And I think we could do a better job of showing those parents or grandparents or guardians, showing them how to get those things and maybe alleviating frustration before it bubbles up. I think if we have a boardroom full of angry people, or if we have a firestorm going on Facebook, that's indicative of us not being able to get the understanding or getting people heard or getting people satisfaction before that. So can we somehow let parents know, maybe it's in their packet when they, the beginning of the year, talk about chain of command, how to talk to your teacher and, take it to the principal there. Dysart does focus groups. We don't usually do focus groups, but I think that's a model of tapping into the stakeholders that could be very effective. I think our surveys are effective. We've had some very successful forums in the past, and I commend you and your team for that and encourage that again. But if we can put out little fires and build satisfaction and within individuals, then they become our billboards, for lack of a better word. They become our own, our ambassadors, advocates. So, and I think it's not that we're not doing a good job, but that we're not telling our stakeholders how to get the satisfaction that they want, because it's there.
That's a great point. I think of 12B1 fees when in the investment world, that you have that money for advertising, but in my line of work, there is no budget for advertisement. So it's all about word of mouth and the experience. I think about the number one thing I get a comment from the community is, I didn't know. So how do we combat that? I didn't know. I didn't know I was supposed to go to my teacher, my principal. So we focus a lot on social communication, email, internet, the human contact. We can't forget that piece, which lends me to like to look into programs such as the Parent Liaison Program, volunteer training. And from what I heard, there used to be a Peoria University where almost something similar to the PLI, Peoria Leadership Institute, where Peoria Unified used to host a high overview course of all the areas of our district, and they would educate our community. I believe Mr. Hicks and Mr. Savoy said it was called Peoria University, but I would like to see something like that where we host a rotation. But in any case, finding who we are and communicating that, and also can't forget, what is our competition, what are they doing, being cognizant of what we're up against. And that's it.
I'm thinking that we're coming to the end. I almost changed the slide for next steps to say go home as the next step, but I'm only gonna bring up one thing here. We have a lot of work to do, obviously, and the people that worked on all this are remarkably excited about what they've done, and I think that's a good thing in and of itself. But what we also have to do is say, wait a second. And so that's going to happen starting on the 26th of June. And we are requiring all of our project managers or sponsors, the 4 leads in particular, to bring, actually we have a format for this, to bring project charters to a meeting that describes in more detail exactly what we hope to do with these projects and what they're about. And specifically, and this is the thing that we're really emphasizing, stop and say, what is the data or what is the evidence that answers the why question? Why are we going to do this? It may sound like the neatest thing in the world to go do, but in an area of constrained resources and constrained time, why are we doing this? And so it's not going to be able to say, oh, because John thinks it's a cool idea to have this neat cybersecurity thing. It's going to have to be much more evidence-based than that. And so Linda has been very supportive of that as well in terms of making sure that we all do that. We've got our eyes on each other and all that so that that happens. And so that will start happening on the 26th of June at executive team meeting. And then we'll start laying out actual project timelines and then deconflicting a little bit, if I can use that old term, to make sure that we're not stepping on each other's toes with resources and all that. So some of these projects may start later than we thought, maybe be replaced by something else based on your feedback. But I think we've got a good starting point now for a really good, aggressive plan.
Will our ideas be reflected in an updated?
Well, I think, yes, absolutely. What we're going to have to do is take what you've said to us tonight.
They're going to rewatch the board meeting.
Yeah, right.
You've got to spare 5 hours?
Yeah, that's right. We have to take what was discussed tonight and figure out how best to incorporate those comments and so forth.
Awesome.
And if there's something that just doesn't seem to make sense in this particular year, we'll have to be able to tell you why it doesn't make sense.
I would like to propose that we rework our value statement.
That is point 4.
What a great team.
And with that said, we are done unless you have any other
I do
comments.
want to just make a comment. I have no idea the mind-boggling amount of hours and hard work that went into this, but it was amazing. You guys just really outdid yourself. I believe that it's a really good start on excellent way to get ourselves in here. And I believe that the commitment you've all shown is going to filter down through, all the levels of our district. And I believe that it's going to cause excitement to know that we do have a cohesive plan. I'm really excited about it. Really good.
Yeah, and I'd just like to throw out there real quick, sorry. Let's go to the restroom, but there is a lot discussed today, and there are a lot of struggling that is going on without question. So I would say this, don't be afraid to, when you come back and as you stratify all the priorities, because everything is showing like an August 2019 deadline, and when it's all kind of scheduled to come to fruition at that point, as we get closer. But if, there are challenges and opportunities, let's talk about those, so we can get through them together, as we further along throughout this process. I think everyone in this room, definitely wants to be involved in some way, but certainly support, everything that you do. So I think, really the question is, how we can help, you be successful. Right?
Appreciate that.
Yep.
Thank you.
I think that academics was obviously very well covered, and I think that career and technical was also covered in that first area. I'm still scratching my head about where we're addressing our commitment to arts education and quality athletic program. I think it should be reflected somewhere in our plan.
Let's take a look at that, because everything that, and you've said this several times, right, that you can't include everything, but that is an area that we need to certainly take a look at, especially since we're looking at bond money where we've dedicated a whole portion of that to improving the auditoriums, the instruments for the first time. So then why did we do that, and what do we do with it when we get it? So I think it's a good idea to do that.
Definitely, and I took the pleasure of printing out our July 28, 2017 strategic plan discussion to now. Kudos to all of you and the work well done. I look forward to sharing. We have a strategic plan, we have clarity, we have focus. I think that's going to set a lot of calm people's nerves down, and please let us know how we can help.
The person who will let you know will be Lynn Bailey, who becomes the project manager of all these. And if you think this group is intense, Lynn is amazing, and keep everything. When you see her down the hall, you go, oh gosh, I'm in trouble, I didn't get this done today. It's very, very exciting, so thank you, team, you're great.
Okay, survival.
Anything you
Nice
can
job.
skip here?
I'm shuffling through. Okay, so returning back to we got through the consent agenda item, and we did 10-1. No, we need to start at 10-1. We need to start at 10-1.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good eye, good eye. Okay. Yes, we did. Good, thank you. 10-1, consideration of approval to enter into a contract for employment with Ms. Linda Pallas Thompson for the position of superintendent for the 2018-2019 fiscal school year. With that, I will start with a motion. I move to approve Ms. Linda Pallas Thompson for the position of superintendent for the 2018-2019 fiscal school year for 1 year as presented to the governing board. We have a motion by myself and Ms. Pengarelli as a second. And opening up the floor for discussion. Would anybody like to start?
I'd just like to say we were all like, Lynn has been doing such a good job. Stability in the district has increased a lot. We know that you don't really want to stay forever, so we have to find somebody else. So we thought that with the 1-year contract, it leaves all the doors open. And we appreciate your willingness to stay if we still need you another year. So we looked at the 1-year contract as a way to get the full goodie bag, right? And to be able to keep you on the string. Thank you. Thank you. But, so anyway, we're excited about the direction that the district is. We believe that Ms. Pallas will be the one to direct us to continue to direct the district. We will get there.
I would like to add, my experience thus far with you, Ms. Pallas Thompson, has been phenomenal, to say the least. And taking lessons learned that we've gone through as a district and as a governing board in the past 18 months, the lesson that we learned, if we have to end a contract, it could have financial risks put upon us. So what we did was, what I will support is the 1 year, and then as we go through the superintendent search, we definitely want to rediscuss an option for a second year as we move forward. We owe it to our district and to everybody involved to take a look at what the candidate pool looks like, because we do want the best. We have a solid foundation for a strategic plan, but also know that we have an option for a second year, and this gives us the flexibility to do what's best by our kids, and we'll move forward together.
Pallas Thompson, you are
You need a.
the first individuals that.
Wait, I need this.
Wait a second, this isn't being recorded, is it? No, you're one of the first individuals that I met at the DAC when I was first elected to the board, and I've always enjoyed your passion and your empathy, compassion for our students, teachers, and staff. You were asked to sit in this seat, in front of a time of unrest, and certainly your leadership and your team, the individuals who sat in these seats, as you continue to drive those conversations to get the district through, that time frame, the red thread. So you've shown certainly your resilience, ability to maintain a level head, in the face of adversity. And so, I absolutely fully support, this 1-year contract, and certainly the option, for another year of renewal, in the case there's that need. So, thank you.
just wanted to say thank you. Thank you for stepping up. We really appreciate it. You've done a phenomenal job. I know the whole board, just by their comments, agrees. I hope that this year is a little bit smoother than, than last year. But congratulations.
Okay, we have would you like to add any comments?
I know it's late, it's not 7:30, it's a couple hours later. I'm so honored. Thank you so much. I appreciate all of you. The team, I look good because you guys are so good. That's just the fact. That is just the fact of all of you around this room. And you have become, all of you around this table have become my family. So when I have a conversation, I call and Kathy, I need you. Let's go to lunch. And the conversations, it becomes part of a family. Thank you so much for everything you have provided me. And you've just made me a better person. And I just appreciate all of you. So thank you. Love you, obviously, all of you. Thank you.
Excellent. And with that, we have a motion to vote on. Oh, it's me. It's me. Congratulations. Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you, thank you.
Okay, so we have a few more items, but are we comfortable with tabling 10.3? Ms. Linda Pellis-Thompson, there's a few, do any of them need to be discussed? 10.3, 10.4, and 10.5?
If we could hold 10-4 only for a minute, Mrs. Sayas-Martinez, and if we go to that item quickly, only because the due date is June
Okay, so we have
30th
to.
for that one. It could have been in a consent agenda, I believe. If we touch that one for a minute?
Sure, please. Let's table then 10.3 and 10.5.
That's great.
Okay, so I move to take.
I know you're, I'm sorry.
Okay, if she has one sentence, one simple sentence.
Michelle, would you like to, Michelle, would you like to do
10.3.
10? Would you like to do this one?
Please, and we're going to go ahead and proceed with 10.3, Peoria Unified School District's fiscal year 2014 performance audit recommendations and update. I believe you had a simple sentence we would love to hear.
So close.
Thank you. We'll provide the board with an update in the Thursday report, but I am happy to report that the Peoria District cleared all of the recommendations that were made as part of our fiscal 2014 performance audit within the 24-month required time period. And that's quite an accomplishment for all of our sites. And
Yes.
Well done.
Yes.
Yeah, she rocks.
Yes.
Yeah, that was good.
Yes, definitely time
By
for
the Auditor General's
celebration.
office, yes.
Definitely
Thank you.
time. Thank you. Yeah, fabulous. Okay, now 10.4, recommendation to approve the implementation of the district dropout recovery program.
That's great. Thank you so much. It's listed here pretty clearly. I just got this about a week or so ago from the State Department. It's a program, a dropout recovery program. We visited a little bit about it. It's for students who've been out for 30 days. We have a pretty good graduation rate, but based on that rate, we expect that there's probably 100 kids per grade level at high school that might have dropped out for some particular reason. What this requires us to do is have a satisfactory plan in place, to have a project, to have a program, and we'd be receiving funding back. I believe it's $500 a student for students who do actually take this program and do it. We don't know the need yet, so it kind of goes against the strategic plan, but it allows us to apply for it, and then if in fact we determine the need, we can go ahead without any loss or anything. It has a potential of being there. The deadline is June 30th, so we wanted to get your approval to say, well, yes, at least apply for that grant, and if we don't use it, nothing goes wrong with it. And it could be something that's powerful for us.
So it's an action item? Mm-hmm. Any questions? Okay, need a motion?
I move that we approve the implementation of the district dropout recovery program.
Second?
We have a motion for Mr. Sandoval and a second by Ms. Connect. Excellent. Oh, mine says air. Let's see. Did you guys get an air? Red, so it looks like it went. Everybody voted? Yeah. Okay, there it goes.
Okay, now you can drop down
Yes,
to
so
the list.
the rest of us.
Okay, we're getting, which one do you want to have? Which one?
I put it in, do you see it? Okay.
Yes, right.
Go to the right hand, do you see the red hand?
It says change vote.
Click on it and then re-click on it, that's what I had to do. Click on it and then re-vote.
Did it work?
Yep.
Motion passes 5-0. Okay, and then I move to table,
The informational reports everybody puts.
yeah. Yes. But we have the staff recognitions, the board recognitions, and 10.5 report and discussion on local. I can table those. I move to table 7.1, 7.2, and 10.5. And Ms. Connect seconds. We'll do a voice vote. All in favor say aye. All opposed say nay. And I did an aye as well. Motion passes 5-0 to table 7.1, 7.2, and 10.5. And 10.6, we're almost done. Request for future agenda items for future governing board meetings. It's great now that we have a strategic plan. We will continue to look at the existing items to align them to our agenda. So now we have a plan to move forward with, and we'll start cracking the whip on those.
And maybe we can get in the habit when we make proposals of saying, this fits under here.
It'd be great.
That's a great point. And Mr. Sandoval? Yes. And we can have a template to say strategic plan.
Yeah, so I'd like to add our, liquidated damages, QC.
There you go.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
To a future governing board meeting discussion. More specifically, what I'd also like to understand within that is how many teachers we actually see leave the district in June, let's say over the last 3 to 5 years, just to understand the trend. Okay. And how many of those are actually assessed? Sorry, back to March? Okay.
And that's bullet 3 under stewardship?
Well, I was just going to thank you, Ms. Kennedy. Yes, that is under, with our strategic plan, on the wrong slide here. Stewardship of community resources. Actually, safety and well-being, I think, it is the emotional currency of our teaching staff that this does certainly directly address. Am I wrong on that? Safety and well-being, is that not well-being?
It's more
money.
More money
It's
issue.
more money.
It affects social emotional, but I think it's more money.
It's probably under looking at this policy again. For the purpose, they go together.
They all kind of go together, right,
But
Mr. Gay? We talked about that earlier.
everything.
We'll find that they do.
Oh, yes, yes, so,
What do you
staying
say?
on topic for agenda, thank you, Ms. Airy, so that we don't break open meeting law. Did we get the agenda item?
Got it.
And whatever Mr. Sandoval said, I second for discussion. Any other future agenda items? Ms. Connect.
So, interesting conversation at Summer Leadership. One was about equity, access, and outcomes, and we had a lively discussion about equitable access to those things that families pay for out of pocket. So, I'll give you one-on-one some details about what we're talking about, but what are we asking families to pay for out of pocket? Are they all necessary? That kind of thing. And I think that falls under, I think, community connectedness, actually. Yes?
Do we have a second? Come on. Any more items?
It could be under stewardship too, right there, Michelle. Michelle, stewardship on that
All
one?
right, no more items.
Because it's again money.
Everybody can take a look at, all right, we're moving forward. Thank you so much. Almost done here. Yeah. 11.1, 11.2, and 11.3 can be seen online, all those reports and future draft agenda items. So now I need an adjournment.
I move that we adjourn the meeting.
I second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, thank you.